Actually, yeah, why don't we get started? So today, it's session 0. We are going to be running through 3 things. We're going to be going through logistics first. Then we're going to just touch on some key wine terms that I think we all should know. Most of you guys probably know them, but we're just going to hit on them anyway. And then we're going to just describe what we mean by tasting. But you know the basics. It's not too complicated, but it'll be helpful. Okay, so logistics. We've made a couple of changes. So it's still Fridays at 5 p.m. And it is still on Zoom. One thing we're doing now, we are recording, which I should have done. So let me do that. I don't know how to.
I think you are. I think you already are. It's already says recording in the top. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. So don't say anything crazy, guys. You're being recorded. So yes, it is being recorded. So you can watch it with your friend group and with your group after the fact. If for some reason Friday at 5 p.m. doesn't work for you that week. That said, we would love to have you here to participate and engage, just so we can have a dialogue going on. But we understand that that's not going to work for everyone every week. So what is the format? We're going to be following the wine grapes. So we're going to be touring regions where we see the grapes do it their best. So what that means is that we're going to be starting in Italy. So in Italy, we're going to be touring the first week. So next week on the 14th, we're going to be looking at Prosecco and Chianti, 2 staples in kind of food and wine pairings. Then week after on the 21st, we're going to go to Cab and Sauvignon Blanc. So we're going to have a white and a red. Third week, we're actually having 2 reds. And then the 4th week, we're having 2 bottles again, but it's 2 bottles of the same grape. So each week is 2 bottles, but it's going to vary in kind of what we're exploring. And so as we go through, we're looking at different grapes. And as we go through different grapes, we're actually also going to be looking at different places. And so each week is also kind of focused on a specific region. So we're starting Southern Europe, and then going towards Western Europe, and then actually coming back and then doing a little bit around the world to finish. In reality, though, every week is actually going to be a little bit of France, just because, it's said that the study of wine is really the study of France. And it kind of means that, unfortunately, for better or for worse, it's a lot of France. And so it's nice if you know French. I'm probably going to butcher some French words, and that's probably expected in wine, but I just ask that you don't laugh too hard. But it is a lot of French. Okay. So you could find all this info on the syllabus, but who wants to read the syllabus? It's a club, right? And so we do recommend some supplies. We recommend these glasses, which I didn't know how to make a QR code, but I made 2 QR codes. It took me a long time. So if one person buys those glasses using those QR codes, I'll feel very happy. My girlfriend's convinced that no one's going to use the QR code. So anyway, so you have 2 options. You have the low budget QR code and the high budget QR code.
We're proud of you, Seth.
Nice. And so, you just pick your phone up, scan one, and it'll give you a link to Amazon where you can buy these. They're sets of 4, and both are kind of the standard, and you'll be in a good spot. So I just need one person to do it. Thank you. Cool.
I was gonna say, it looks like the high budget one doesn't work. And also, just a heads up, if you use canva.com, you can make free QR codes very easily.
So don't scan the QR codes apparently, but
the low budget
one works. Yeah, the low budget one works.
All right, so guys, we're just getting by this time.
You're saving
next
us
year
money
we'll get high
on
budget.
accident.
All right. So, okay. So what you'll also need a corkscrew, that the QR code is on the syllabus, may or may not work apparently, but it might. Then the last thing you'll need is friends, which come in handy occasionally.
Do they sell those on Amazon?
What's that?
Do they sell those on Amazon?
They sell corkscrews everywhere.
They might.
No, friends.
Friends, I know they might. I'm not sure though. Okay. So let's talk about wine. It's what we're here for. So the way club is going to be structured is each time we get here, hopefully in person, as in on Zoom, we are going to have two bottles, and we're gonna have directions. So let's say next week, we're gonna have a Prosecco. So at the very start of the 5 o'clock, we are going to all put the Prosecco in the freezer. So it's good for me because otherwise I'm just gonna talk about wine on end and it's gonna get boring. So what it means is I have a timer. We have about 30 minutes until I need to shut the heck up because it's time to drink. So that means I have 30 minutes to kind of lay the groundwork, tell you about what's going to happen, and then it's going to happen because the wine is ready to serve. Same thing, about 15, 20 minutes in, we're going to put the red in the fridge. We're probably going to do that actually once we take the Prosecco out. And so basically each week we will be done by 6 o'clock, which I think is good just in the interest of time. And I know people are quite busy. So then, you don't have to listen to me if I get kind of long-winded. You can always put me on pause, just because I know that not everyone has the same level of interest, and you're with your friends in the small group setting. And so if someone has kind of a juicy conversation, that's fine. That's what it's for. It's for gathering together. It's not only for the wine hard stuff. It's for whatever you want to take out of it. Okay, now the practical stuff that we've changed. So the wine pickup is now Monday or Tuesday. It is no longer today. These are 3 time windows we're offering. It's my apartment. It's right across the street from the med school. You're probably gonna, if you're parked at the med school, you're probably gonna want to repark on Delaware or Allen. But I think closer to, you'll put it in maps and you'll see. I'm on the 3rd floor, so I can help people bring wine down. They are cases, so they're kind of heavy. And so some of them are kind of in smaller packages for people who are a little bit smaller. And then we also have large cases, and then I can help bring to the car. So it shouldn't be too much of a fiasco. But there is one other change that we're making that might make it a fiasco. So payment wise, we are actually doing it up front. I know I initially had said that we were going to do it by week, but the other eBoard people and I were talking last night, and I think it makes more sense to do it up front, just because in case things change or in case just something happens. I think it would make sense if we do it all up front. And I really do apologize if this is a huge inconvenience. Once again, I want to emphasize that split among a group up front, 3 people, $60 each for 12 wines. You have 5 people, that's $40 each, and you're getting 6 weeks of wine tastings. And then, as you can see, with larger groups, it gets even cheaper. So that's
I had a quick question about the payments. Are you accepting Venmo, or is it cash or check, or how do you want it?
So Venmo or cash. I probably could accept checks, I guess. I think
I didn't know. Okay,
I have a bank account, so I probably could accept checks too.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, I guess Venmo or cash would be preferred. But yeah, no, so thank you for asking a question. We're kind of trying to open up now to questions that people might have about the payment change and kind of the payment situation.
Do you have Zelle by any chance?
I can get it. Zell.
Zelle.
I've heard
through Bank of America.
Yeah, it's just, it might be on your banking app. Sorry, I'm the last person to not have Venmo, so I don't feel like making it. Thank you.
Zelle. Okay. I'll be on that. Any other questions? Okay. So I think we're going to move on now to kind of what I think is the fun part. Though it is more listening to me, which might not be that fun. We're going to be talking about wine, which is pretty dope. So some definitions. What is wine? It's a drink. Basically, it's pretty simple. You take grapes, you take the stuff that's naturally on the grape skin. So you just take grapes and they, over time, turns into wine. Obviously, you have to kind of isolate it, put it in a barrel, do all these things, but you really don't do much. You're creating alcohol, water. I mean, water was already in it. The alcohol is being created by the yeast, residual sugar, some CO2, and some flavor molecules. And it really is, the flavor compounds are kind of the interesting part. And that's kind of why, there's a club about wine. That's why we care. Alcohol, it's fun, sure, it's nice, but like it wouldn't be such an interesting drink if it were just the alcohol. There's more to it than that. And hopefully through this class, we can kind of touch on some of those things. So wine is also, it's a cultural phenomenon. The history of wine is almost, it's pretty interwoven with the Western tradition. Socrates was drinking wine at the symposium when talking about philosophy. It's part of certain cultures. Food and wine is ingrained in a large part of Europe, and even Argentina with Malbec. It becomes a part of the culture. And it's also a lifestyle product or a lifestyle experience. It's an experiential product. So when I think of the best wines I've had, I don't think of the most expensive wine I've had. I think of where I was, what I was eating, who I was with. And in that sense, the wine is more than just a wine. It's kind of the experience around it. And that's what makes it a rather special thing, I think. Get off my soapbox. Next slide. Okay, so how the hell do we taste? You guys took anatomy at some point for all of you. So you know how we do taste, kind of. There's all those cranial nerves and stuff, but that is not really that relevant. No one really cares. So we're not going to talk about that. What we are going to talk about is how we taste in terms of taste in the colloquial sense of experience flavors. So experience, it starts with sight for wine. So I have here, I just poured a little glass of Chardonnay. So sight, we're going to look at it. Then we can smell it. Then we can taste it, which we will later. And then we're going to kind of understand what that means. The mnemonic that all people use in wine that you'll hear a lot, you'll hear the 5 S's, but there really are 7 or 8. There's C, as I said. There's swirl, which I will say is one of the most fun parts of being a wine snob. You just constantly, it's like almost an innate thing that I do, even if I'm drinking water. I just like have my hand on the table swirling, so be aware of that. It's something we do. And then you sniff it. Then you can, all right, so slurp. Slurp is something you're actually supposed to do in like formal setting, like formal as in like if you're a wine critic. In public with friends, I don't recommend it. You'll look weird. But you can do it and it will enhance the experience of taste. Then you savor. Then you may spit it if you are busy that week. Let's say you have a big exam the next day, which is impossible because it's a Friday. But if you did, or you just have something later that night, or you're really stressed, you can spit. It does. You'll get much of the same experience, and it actually evolutionarily we've evolved to kind of be hyper aware of things we spit out. So in the Congo, in a rainforest, let's say, if we encountered a plant that we chewed and spit out, it would usually be a poison. And so our brain would really register the taste sensation, and it would realize if we were to encounter that again, we would know to avoid it. And so if you do spit it out, you'll realize you'll actually become a better taster than if you don't. That said, you might not have as much fun, so it's up to you what you choose. And then one of my favorites is spilling. I spill at any point, so you can insert that at any place in the S spectrum. Okay. So as we said, there are different stages. And so some fall under C, some fall under smell, some fall under taste. As I said, when we look against a white background. And so that's just a way we can kind of gauge the colors, because when the background changes with a see-through glass, it's easy for our, for us to have a different baseline of perception, and that's not great if we're trying to standardize our way of tasting. So there's a spectrum of colors. We're going to judge certain things based on the rubric that we're going to give out. And it's, it's kind of a formal way to do it, but I think over time it'll become a little more intuitive, and so it won't be as forced. In terms of smelling, we tend to smell for about 5 to 10 seconds. As I said, we're swirling. You tilt it, and if you have a big nose, it really gets close. So I recommend that. If you don't have one, you should get one. And then you sniff the aromas, which is good. And so technical, the wine actually has 3 noses, or 3 aromas. So the first is, you don't move it. Second one, you do the gentle swirl, which, volatilizes some molecules. It's kinetic energy. So more actually go into the gaseous phase. The third is after it's been aerated a long time. So this is why we decant wines, which we hopefully will talk about during the course. It's, oxidation. It's happening to all of us all the time. And it happens to wine over time as well. And so it actually softens the wine, just like maybe a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old is kind of a little softer than an 18-year-old or someone going through puberty. Same thing with wine. Wine mellows out over time. And as exposure to oxygen happens, the wine will soften. And so that's the final nose. And then in wine, we're super technical. Not only are there 3 noses, the first nose has 3 noses. So like for the first one, not moving it, there's not moving it at the chest. There's not moving it at the chin. There's not moving it at the nose. We call it the the chest, chin, nose test, which is pretty easy to remember, like heads, fingers, knees, and toes. It's just, chest, chin, nose. Okay. So there are other pedantic distinctions that we will eventually come to. So, the difference between a bouquet and an aroma, both are really, we're probably going to use them interchangeably, but technically one is coming from the wine grapes, whereas the other one is coming from the methods and the production that happens after the grapes. But we will probably talk about both, because both are used interchangeably in kind of conversation with even sommeliers and with just people who like wine. So no need for that formality. So what to look for when we're talking about smell, we're going to talk about how strong it smells. So the intensity. We're going to talk about the nature of the smell. So is it fruity? Is it floral? One kind of cop out is to say, oh, it's grapey, because it came from grapes. That technically, yeah, you're right. It is kind of grapey, like it's wine, but it's not that informative. And like grapes don't really have that strong a smell. And you'll find that most wines actually don't smell like grapes because of the whole fermentation thing. They're not really grapes anymore. So you're actually going to smell more of other fruits in it. So if you say grapes, like it might be funny at the time, but like it might not be that funny. So just a heads up. Okay. So levels of complexity and wine faults are also things to look for. There's one wine fault called TCA, or corked, what it's called. It's like 1 in 12 wines are corked. And so it means that, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it means out of our, 15 cases, we're gonna have 15 bottles that are corked. So that by it immediately, it's usually a red, but it can be a white as well. It smells a little bit. Everyone knows kind of the smell of like a wet dog or wet socks, or it's not great, or like the gym locker room. It kind of smells like that, and it smells like that. And you pour it, and then 5 minutes later, if it still smells like that, you got to. Usually it blows off and it gets a little better, but it might stay like that. In which case, you have a corked wine. Everyone, interestingly, has a different threshold of when they consider it to be. This is for all flavors, but especially for something like TCA, or another one everyone is very different for is with Cabernet and the Cabernet family. There's something called methylpyrazines, which are kind of like bell pepper taste, or like herbaceous, kind of like freshly mown grass. And some people like really are sensitive to that kind of bell pepper taste, and they hate it. whereas other of us, myself included, are not that sensitive. And so we are not that put off by, a cool climate cat. Anyway, there's a wine wheel. We're probably not going to use it extensively just because I think that there are other ways of, kind of talking about the tasting experience. But if you are a visual person, I think it can be helpful to kind of see it visually.
Somebody asked a good question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Let's take a peek. Why do we use corks? That's a great question. Okay, so it's funny. I mean, so so the question is, why do we use corks if it can ruin the wine? And it can ruin the wine. There was a huge taint. I mean, Portugal grows all the world's cork, basically. They have these cork trees, they have all these forests, and it's good for the Portuguese economy, but wine-wise, it's not always good. Hundreds of years ago, it was like the only way to seal a glass bottle. We have new ways now. We can use caps. We know how to do that now. The interesting thing is, and so a lot of places like Australia and New Zealand, they mainly use screw caps because it avoids this problem of having so much. Let's say you make 100 million in wine cases, or that you produce that much. That means what? 5 million of those are just garbage because of the corkage problem. So Australia bypasses that, but the problem is for them as a bit, their business owners, is that they can't charge as much because in the consumer's mind, a wine that doesn't have a cork in it is not as valuable. And so there's kind of this trade-off between what is best for the wine versus what is best for the pocketbooks of the winemaker. And so it's an interesting dichotomy, but it's a good question. And yeah, good question. Okay, so one way to get better at smelling and tasting is to smell things at the supermarket. Go to Whole Foods, go to the produce section, smell things. There are tons of aromas in there. The herbs sections. There's just tons of things that you think and you but that you can remind yourself. And some of those notes are not going to be as apparent in wine we drink, but there are going to be nuances of it because, as we were talking about fermentation reactions earlier, wine, it creates a lot of byproduct reactions. It's not just, alcohol being created from sugar. There's a lot of side reactions. And so those side reactions create these organic compounds. And they're not high concentrations, but they are traces of them. And so we're going to be talking about things that some of you are going to be like, I don't smell, grapefruit in this. Like, what the hell is he saying? He's making it up. And you might not smell it. I've kind of practiced. I know what to look for. So that I think in my mind, all right, I'm drinking a white wine. Do I smell limes? Do I smell lemons? I kind of know what to look for. And so it's easier for my brain to be like, oh, I do see it. Because once you know what to expect, it's easier to detect it. Whereas if you don't know what to detect, it's a little harder. And so that's kind of one of the skills we'll develop during the course. So when we're tasting, we're going to skip number one, but we're going to roll the wine in our mouth a little bit to bring the wine into all contact of our oral cavity. And so it's partly to get the wine, the odors, to go through, I don't know, anatomy, what it's called, but the retronasal, there's a way to smell in the back of the throat. That's actually how we, taste things. So there's taste in the, formal sense of, cranial nerve, whatever. And then there's taste in that, like, ooh, I like the taste of chili. I like, spiciness. I like this. But I like the way I like warm food as opposed to cold food. In terms of, action potentials, it's kind of similar, but in terms of the odorants you get in the back of the throat, it's different. And so most of us prefer warm pizza to cold pizza, and that type of thing. And also, as we kind of swirl the wine in our mouth, we're going to get more of that vaporization and stuff to go through the retronasal passage. Now, in terms of, I said we all have different thresholds for methylpyrazine and odorants. We also have very different thresholds for taste. Some of us smoke, and so we're not going to have as many taste buds. Some of us are going to be younger. Some of us are female. Females actually have more taste buds on average than males. And so there's some advantages that some people are going to have that others don't. And so it's going to affect the way you experience the wine, and it'll probably affect your preferences. So if you have more taste buds, you might be what we call a super taster. And so I'm not a super taster, but you may be very sensitive to, tannin. So in the red wines, it might be too astringent for you because you literally have more taste buds. Whereas someone like me who has less, I think of it as like, a whack in the face in the morning type of thing. It's like a good way. I like tannin. Whereas for you, it might be a little too much. So as I said, in terms of, taste in the pure sense, in terms of like, gustation, that's how you say it. There's sweetness, so there's sugar, there's saltiness. Then there's acidity, so hydrogen ions, right? Which is going to cause, lemon juice, which is a different sensation than saltiness and sweetness. And then there's bitterness. So think of eating a walnut, or think of something bitter, a horseradish, something that is unpleasant. And then the final one is actually umami. So that's savoriness or meatiness. So that's like, think of your prime rib or a mushroom dish. That's going to be a different sensation. And these are going to come into play when we talk about pairings, because oftentimes one sensation, if the food is heavy on, let's say, acidity, we're going to want something for the wine that's even more acidic. Or if something is very, let's say, is tannic, is very bitter, we're going to want a wine that's less bitter because it's the relative weightings. And so we're going to be playing with these different things when we talk about pairings. So as I said, some are going to be more important than others. And so acidity and sweetness are kind of two crucial variables in white wine especially, and really all wine, but especially white wine. You have kind of this one tendency for us to like kind of acidity. We like piquant things. One of my favorite foods is, anything with tomatoes in it, some type of tomato sauce or red wine sauce. I like acidity just because I think it adds something. Lemon juice on fish, it adds something. We have a tendency to like that, and we don't, but there's also a counter tendency not to like one thing to dominate. And so when we talk about wine and food especially, we're going to be talking about the balance of things and how you don't want one thing to stand out. Like a good wine, an expensive wine, is actually one that you don't really notice anything because everything is in such perfect harmony. That's not to say we're not going to analyze the heck out of it and we're not going to be talking about it for a long time, but it's something that, it's just, you think to yourself, oh, that's really good. But we'll analyze each component and we'll talk about the different price ranges of the different bottles we're having. And hopefully we'll start to see a pattern, but if not, you'll save a lot of money in your life if you like cheap wine. So remember that. Okay. Tannin is another thing. In red wine, especially, it is going to be the texture on your tongue. Think about chewing, not chewing gum, but chewing cowhide, chewing something like sandpaper, something that literally it kind of takes, what it's actually doing, if you want to be nerdy, is tannin's actually binding the protein molecules on your tongue, and it's making it so that the saliva can't grab on. So it literally feels drier. And so it really makes a drying feeling in your tongue. So hence the sandpaper analogy, but it's either coarse or smooth, and it's coming from the grape skin. So for red wine, we're soaking the wine juice in the skin, and that's how it gets its color. And we're also getting some stem contact, which also has tannins. Same thing with the seeds. They do have tannins, and the oak in the barrels. And one component of good wine is it has a long finish. And so length or finish or aftertaste, or in French, caudelie, that's probably not how you say it, but so be it. It's the length of the aftertaste. And so that is going to depend on the caliber of the wine and other factors, but it will be an indication of quality for the most part. When we go through these 6 weeks, we're going to have different words that we'll use. These are some more common ones. So, there are certain words for acidity. There are certain words for length, for intensity, for bitterness, for tannins, for maturity. As I said, things oxidize over time and they soften up. So we're going to talk about a young wine versus a tired wine. Think of grandma. It's just wine changes over the course of its life, and we'll be able to communicate that. With body, so body, the second to last one on the list, is think of the difference between skim milk and whole milk. So whole milk or heavy cream has a thick body; it's heavy. You can call it full, whereas skim milk is thin. And so it's not only the viscosity, but it's really kind of the impact of that chemical property on the palate. And so a lot of these things, we're going to talk about it like it's a, the odorant molecule, like it's a thing, but it's really how it affects us and its effect on the palate that is really kind of the focus of a wine tasting. And finally, we get to balance, which is a goal of most wines, and not all wines achieve that goal, but we're going to hopefully see some wines that do in the course of 6 weeks. And now a kind of a visual to talk about, see the different relationship between these three of the more important variables. We have them come together. I guess this is a little too nerd. Honestly, I don't think anyone has this memorized, so I don't think you need to. So don't worry. But basically, we use certain words for different degrees of each thing. For us, we'll probably just say, like, if we're on that triangle, it's very sweet, not that tannic, middle acidity. We're not going to use, that means we're going to plot it, on the X, Y, Z axis. No. Don't really worry about that. But it is there in case, someone asked. Okay. So some takeaways. I know this is a lot of stuff. I tend to talk a little fast. But I mean, the highlights. So we're going to talk about wine for 6 weeks. We're going to talk about drinking. And there's alcohol in it, but that's not, and we're going to notice that if it's high or if it's low. I'm going to sit, week 5, we're going to be drinking a Riesling and it's going to be, 8.5%. And we're going to notice that you expect wine to be about 11%. And so if it's high, you may notice it. If it's low, you may notice it. If it's kind of high relative to the other dimensions, such as sweetness, such as tannin, we will notice it. And so we'll talk about it in that sense, but we're really mainly going to be focusing on the other components. So the flavor molecules, the smell, the taste, the texture. And so, remember the mnemonic. So there's see, there's sniff. No, I skipped one. No, there's sniff. Then help me out. There's sip. Anyone remember any of them? A lot of S's. Spill.
Savor?
Swirl.
There's swirl, there's savor. Spit. Yeah, and there's the kind of vulgar, the spit swallow, just so you can choose either one. It depends on the context, right? So yeah, but because I'm giving the presentation, I'm probably going to be spitting for the most part, but you and your group should choose whatever works. But yeah, those are the S's, and so remember some of them. Remember the chest, chin, nose, and really, we're doing this live at 5 from 5 to 6, and we'd love participation if you have the time, but if you don't, we totally understand. And you can watch the videos and just meet up with your friends. You don't have to watch this. It is recorded apparently, so you could. The QR codes don't work, but we have some things going for us. And so we do hope that you guys come back. The wine is available, just to reiterate. The wine is available on Monday from 12 to 3. Again on Monday from 6 to 11. If those windows in the day don't work, we're offering it Tuesday in a different window So from 3 to 6, if the afternoon for the pickup works better for you. And so text me, that's my phone number, and you can use the QR code. Not the QR code. You can use the code to get up to the, but if you have troubles, please let me know, and I can bring the wine down, just because some of it is rather heavy. And so that is the most part. And we're going to field questions after this, and, people can leave as they would like, but, we are going to be going to Italy next week. For those who want to come, we're going to Italy is the beginning of the food and wine marriage. It's kind of the quintessential place where food and wine kind of lives on this, on Mount Olympus. It is, Italians are so proud of their food and wine. We're going to be having Prosecco, which it's such a famous international variety. And then we're going to have a Chianti, which is really one of the heartlands of central Italy. And it's really an exciting, you have it with pasta, you have it with bolognese, you can really have it with any Italian fare. And it's really a staple to Italians. And so I think it's gonna be very exciting to start our look at Europe and wine from Italy. But please come ask questions. People can stay on.
I have a couple of questions actually.
Please.
So you said we're doing a Prosecco and a Chianti, which I don't know how to spell that, but in the slide it said Glare and Sangiovis.
So great.
Are those synonymous?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So it's annoying. So in wine, those are the name of the grapes. So the grape, but it's funny for Italian wine especially. It's like no one talks about the name of the grapes. They talk about the places that they're from. Same thing with Parmesan cheese. So Parmesan is a place, but the cheese is something else. But in Italy they call it by the place. And so same thing here. The grapes are just not talked about that much, but those are the grapes.
I see. Okay. My next question was, do we need to have something to cleanse our palate between
Yes.
the two?
So
okay.
I recommend crackers. And then there's also some stuff for pairing wise. I think for week 1, we were recommending potato chips for the Prosecco. The potato chips for the Prosecco. And then the Chianti, I forget what we put for the pairing.
Is it in the syllabus?
I've looked at it. Yeah,
okay.
I put it in the group chat. But yeah, and that's the thing. The pairings aren't required, but I think for some people it will enhance the experience.
I see it. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question was, what does slurping do? So you mentioned kind of like what bringing the effect of like opening up your mouth or bringing air in. What is the effect of slurping like?
So it's interesting. So it's basically you're taking something in your mouth. And then there's this passageway at the back of the throat that connects the nose. So the kind of where the cribriform plate and all those kind of odorants attach, it attaches to the mouth. And so by slurping, you're getting air to touch the food and drink the liquid in your mouth, and then it kind of mixes with it and kind of brings it up. And so you're getting basically a breeze of those flavors. And so it does help. But then again, it also makes noise. And so you don't have to do it, especially, No, Mary, I don't recommend straws for slurping. Just because you also want to be able to smell it at the outset. But if you're drinking a milkshake, I'm sure straws work.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Hope to see you next week.
Thanks, Seth. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Also I'm looking at the syllabus and it doesn't show like, for example, crackers for next week. It just says Prosecco.
It doesn't?
Cantaloro. Yes. I can if you show me, I can share my screen to show you. If you can
please. Are you allowed to?
You have to, if you go to share screen, there's a little like triangle. If you click on it and allow others to share.
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay, perfect.
Sweet.
Yeah, it just unless I'm missing it.
No, so I re-uploaded a more accurate one.
I see. Okay.
So I apologize. The first one I posted was kind of the first iteration.
Gotcha.
I hadn't added the pairings yet, but
okay. So I will download the new syllabus then.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The one on GroupMe should be a good one.
Okay, perfect.
Updated.
Okay, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Beth.
Talia.